this is a video I've been wanting to make forever because I feel like it's something people don't talk about, okay? They're all looking at symptoms of the problems. They're not looking at the problem. And I'll be honest, I don't know shit about women, okay? So this is just my best attempt to explain something I've seen. Maybe I'm biased, maybe who gives a fuck? I'm just going to give it to you how I see it. Talking to women is a dopamine competition against their phone. All right, now you're probably like, what the fuck is this guy talking about right now? You're probably, what the fuck is he even saying? When I begin a conversation with a woman, the race starts. The race starts to see if I'm more stimulating and more interesting than anything her phone could possibly provide. And so whatever I bring to the table, maybe it's how I look, maybe it's how I make her feel, maybe it's how I do something, maybe it's a history of something, maybe it's the possibility of me leaving. These are all factors which would enable motivation within a woman. And the thing that has changed this dynamic in women is that there used to be not much other competition, you know? In the early 2000s, there was only so much reality TV you could watch, you know? There's only so many things you could do. And so usually the dopamine competition, you know, like kind of like pre-internet or beginning of the internet, was like going to a party and seeing all the different people there and seeing who is the most fun and who is the most interesting of the actual people, of real people, right? But nowadays, then this is a problem of both men and women, but I'm just going to talk about women in this video. Nowadays, when women go to a party or they go to an external kind of event, there's a really weird thing that's happening, is that they're weighing these people, these real people, the people they meet, the guys they meet, let's say, and they're weighing them against the dopamine stimulation that comes from their phone. Whether that's, an old partner, whether that's, their likes on Tinder, whether that's their Instagram posts and maybe, photos. Even looking at like old photos is like a stimulating kind of thing, although that's always kind of been true. And it's just a weird thing to witness because I think that there's a cohort of guys where pre-internet, their verbal skills, what they bring to the table, you know what I'm saying? Their presence would have been much more captivating and much more interesting to women. But these guys, and I would say it's a big chunk of guys, like maybe even 50% of guys, they lose the battle. This is my point of this video. A big chunk of guys are losing the battle against the dopamine stimulation women receive from their phones. And I don't know what the answer is, I don't know what the answer is. It's just strange because I walk around my life and when social media and when technology and even when Tinder, when these things get so good, when the dating problem becomes infinitely worse, you have so many more men on these platforms, although I'm not sure that's true, but let's just say that's true for an argument sense. And then Tinder provides more and more validation, and then more and more desperate guys are willing to like text her and do all this shit. It just results in this scenario that just completely blows up. Because the dopamine machine is fucking running. And these guys have no chance at competing against it. Zero chance at all. And it's really concerning to me. Because I think it's something that's going to end human connection. And this has always been true throughout history, but the only guys who are going to be so stimulating and so interesting to these women are obviously like the really hot guys, or like the really socially charismatic guys too. I'm not saying it's just looks, although that's a factor, or the really rich guys. Like I'm saying really rich. And I don't really fault women for this in a strange way. I hate to sound like a blue pill. It's literally just the construction of the phone itself that's allowed for this interaction. Tinder's a great example. A guy can just like swipe right or whatever the hell on a chick, right? And it wasn't really that much action from the guy. Like, from a biological sense, he didn't waste a lot of calories doing that action. But from a woman's sense, she sees like 100 likes, or I don't even know how Tinder looks. I never used it. But she sees a bunch of validation all at once. And in her mind, that dopamine received is very significant. Whereas across the 100 people who selected her, that biological investment was incredibly minimal. Hopefully that makes sense. And I just think it's a pattern worth recognizing. And it's a thing that the world isn't really even looking at all. I'm like, there's all these things like, woman, dating, hypergamy, da-da-da-da-da. I think hypergamy can likely be attributed to the cell phone simply because of dopamine stimulation in isolation. In isolation. I honestly don't think, this is a hot take, I don't think it has that much to do with some type of genetic underlying thing. It's more that the genetics are being influenced by these environments where women have an option of receive dopamine from my phone or receive dopamine from a guy. And the phone's getting better and better and better. So either the guy has to get better and better and better, or he loses out. And it's so fucking funny because people will tell you to touch grass when you start talking about shit like this. I'm sitting here laughing my ass off touch grass? What? You go outside. Show me a chick who isn't on her phone a fair amount of time. Show me one. It applies to guys too. I'm not gonna shy away to that. But show me one. Because I think it really significantly impacts the psychology of women much more than men in terms of how they select for dating partners. And sure, there's the, content online that's adult-oriented. Hopefully that doesn't get me, shadow banned here on YouTube. Sure, there's that kind of shit. And that impacts men. But that's how men and women are wired differently, it seems. Is that for men, that's the stimulation they want. They want to see some corn, in the cornfields. Whereas, sure, women also similarly interested. Corn, also all sorts of it. But they also have a dopamine-esque, they can trick their own serotonin-esque, psychology. Where they can go into the world and make selections and to be motivated by certain external triggers, And it really just makes me curious because I'll just add some insight at the end. Hopefully this doesn't make me look like a complete incel. I used to be really interested in reading some of these old school pickup artist stuff. Like Owen Cook, RSD, Fast Seduction, The Game, obviously, Mystery. And I always thought they were kind of goofballs, but I realized they were onto something. And I think that if you study game, what game is essentially portraying yourself in a way that stimulates motivation and stimulates dopamine at the highest level. And that's why it was so crazy effective back then. I think a lot of people were like, it wasn't that effective, or it's just they're nitpicking stories and it barely happens that much where you pick up someone with game. I kind of disagree with that. Because in kind of a pre-internet, or also at least super fast dopamine-inducing algorithms, game made you a very interesting thing from a dopamine perspective. Because also no one knows game. Let me tell you some shit about game. You can make a canned story, aka a fake story that you tell yourself over and over again. And then you have all these different hits in the story, and you're like, oh shit, and then we were going to steal this thing, and a cop showed up around the corner. See how that's getting you motivated? Oh my God, what the hell's happening next? And then, oh my goodness, this cop was actually a fake cop, and he said that he was going to, you know what I'm saying? That's canned content, okay? And I'm just saying random shit. But that's the idea of it. Is that stimulating? And then you women are really interested in oh my goodness, you actually survived that? Oh my goodness, what the hell? That was here? And you're yeah, it happened at this abandoned factory. And you're oh my goodness, we should go there one day. See, that's how canned content works. It's stimulating in a similar way to the way the phone is stimulating. And when you make a persona, it's stimulating. And when you feign the idea that you're a highly selected guy, then that's stimulating too. You know, if you drop in a story and you're like, you know, the end game, they always tell you shit like this, like, you know, oh, you're at, you know, veterinarian school? Oh, I know a chick who's into that. Okay, well, now you're a guy who knows chicks. Bang. You know what I'm saying? And so that makes you more interesting because she's more motivated to get to know you because another chick knows you, yada, 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 right? And my whole point is that all this old school pickup artist stuff is essentially just trying to get dopamine out of women, trying to make them motivated to talk to you. That's why someone who's good at game is just dropping breadcrumbs, you know? Because they have to know the rules. That's why pickup lines are so stupid. People think pickup artistry is pickup lines. You're so dumb. You obviously haven't read anything. Like, no one uses pickup lines. If anything, good game is just slowly introducing yourself, slowly laying the shit on, slowly building, you know, covertly building a reason as to why they should get to know you, slowly building interest, asking more questions about them, and talking about yourself less. That's good game. You know what I'm saying? And it just makes me so curious having that, you know, perspective as well, having been interested in all that shit. Because I was interested in game, and I never really even used it. Because I was just interested in how humans work, you know? And it's funny because I will still use aspects of what I've learned from those books, and it's actually really, really effective. So honestly, there should be like a, you know, reckoning. That shit should come back, in my opinion. But my whole point is that shit used to work back in the day. Back before hyper-fast kind of internet shit happened, because you were the most interesting dopamine experience for her, you know? You did everything right. That was a good game, everything right. And you just constantly triggered the dopamine. But nowadays, it's way more difficult, because you can say some crazy thing or say some crazy story, and the chick's just sitting there like, yeah, I scrolled TikTok for 3 hours this morning, you know? I've already heard the craziest fucking stories fed to me directly through an algorithm. Yeah, and on my fucking TikTok feed, there's like 15 serial killers, and I already know all their entire backstories. So you have this weird like dynamic from women nowadays where it's like, oh yeah, whatever, you know, which is unfortunate in my opinion, because it's like you're saying like, yeah, whatever to what? Like, oh, because you were on your phone and you saw an interesting dopamine like. So because you saw something like dopamine like stimulating on your phone, you're not going to interface and interact with another real individual? Maybe I sound like salty or pessimistic in my tone there, but that's not really my point. My point is that it's just like strange, I suppose. Because in reality, imagine if, I always have this thing in my mind where it's like, imagine if people looked at their phones but the screen was never on. Isn't that so strange from a biological standpoint? To stare at like a black stone? Just stare at it? Imagine that. All these people, their screen wasn't on. But because the LEDs are flashing and they're in certain coordinated order and, you know, they're moving at 60 hertz a second, that means something to your brain. It means something. And I think it's the stimulation of the brain that really fucks things up, you know? And man, I think TikTok was the one that got him, you know? COVID and TikTok, that's what happened, I swear to you. That's kind of what destroyed the modern, well, I hate to use the term modern woman, but in how I see it, I really think that was the difference. That was the shit that changed everything. Was COVID, and then all these chicks were super fucking lonely, same with for the guys, and super in a weird isolated state. And they just started scrolling TikTok like mad woman. Okay, they started scrolling. And now it's like the cigarette. Now they can't put it down. And Instagram was already bad enough, but I think that like maybe like 2016 Instagram, although I was like still kind of a kid, I could still kind of tell that like, okay, it's like Facebook, and sure, if you have the cool profile, like that's cool. And like that's sure it's gonna get you some chicks, but now it is really fucking slanted, you know? I guess is my point. And it's slanted almost scientifically because, I guess to sum up this video, dopamine-inducing experiences from digital devices only seem to be increasing. And I think that men with no external stimulation, with no external tools they're kind of always going to provide a similar amount of dopamine, kind of inspiration within a woman, And it always just makes me so curious, It always makes me so curious what's next. Because I think as a man, if you understand these rules, there are things you can do. Like there are ways you can speak and ways you can understand to kind of trigger, motivation or dopamine or things like that. I hate to sound Machiavellian, but get a bunch of money and then don't just have money. Money is kind of overrated. Then invest it in a bunch of status symbols and then have the status symbols linger over your head, Like, oh yeah, I drive a Porsche. Now, see, here's the thing. Not every woman will care. But if a woman's interested in a man who has a Porsche or interested in a man who has money, that's going to start to trigger some motivation. And I think that if I realize she might have a legitimate chance with a person with high status or very good looks, then that is the dopamine experience that might actually beat out the cell phone. But for everyone else who doesn't have a lot to offer, I think biologically, a long time ago, you would have gotten more of a chance. But nowadays, just not there for you. And I think that's what I want to say in this video, is that it's really a dopamine problem. It's really a motivation problem. And if you can't spark the flame, if you can't spark the fire with the dopamine and the motivation of that initial interest and that initial learning, you're not going to get anywhere else. And I think a lot of us are just going to be alone forever. That's pretty much all I got to say in this video. Hopefully this is informative or a new take. See ya.